Okay, so continuing on with the attachment side of things, we're going to move on to the muzzle device. So specifically, this is going to be for things like suppressors, muzzle brakes, barrels. Uh, yeah, I guess that's about it. But basically, how to set it up for each one. Now, it's going to be kind of hard to show just because this firearm already comes with a barrel and a muzzle device, but I'm going to give you an example on how you go through and actually set it up because it's really quite simple and it's just defined through a tag. And I'll explain how that works because it's very similar to the forward grip and how that system works. So to begin, let's go ahead and just make a new blueprint. Same thing of type actor, and we'll call it BP underscore suppressor. Now let's go ahead, add a static mesh component. We'll make it the root. And there is a suppressor. I think these are mine. Should be, yeah, this one here, SM underscore suppressor 5. So there's going to be, I believe, a slight, let's see, which axis is the suppressor on? So that's X forwards, and these are all going to be Y forwards. So we have a little bit of an inconsistency, so we're going to want to rotate this around. So that's very simple. Let's go ahead and just go to the suppressor mesh, and we can go ahead under details, search for transform, and we have the import rotation, and we're just going to rotate by 90. So now we just want to go ahead and export it because obviously we can't import it because we don't have it. So let's go ahead, right click, asset actions, export. Yeah, I'll just do it to the root. Doesn't really matter. I'll just leave everything as default and export. Let's go ahead and re-import the mesh. There we go. And select it again. And now you can see it rotated itself 90 degrees. So now we have it pointing Y forwards like that. Yeah, just making sure that was the actual tip that I was looking at, so it is the right direction. So now we have it set to go Y forwards. So we're good to go there. Go ahead and save the mesh. And we want to start setting up the other parts. So first off, let's just make it simple. Actually, first thing we need to do is actually make this replicated. So let's mark replicates. And let's add this as an attachment to the firearm. So let's go ahead, go to BP underscore gun. We're going to add a new SKG attachment component. So you can just select that or your forward grip and Shift D and duplicate and rename to muzzle device. So once we have that, we're going to change the default attachment from BP underscore red dot to BP underscore suppressor. And then we need to set what we're going to attach to. So we're going to make a new attach to socket called S underscore attachment underscore suppressor. So let's make this socket. So copy the name, go to our firearm mesh, right click, create a new socket, name it S underscore attachment underscore suppressor. So matching the same name. And we'll add a preview asset of the suppressor. So SM underscore suppressor 5. Need to rotate by 90 degrees, and we're just going to get it kind of in the ballpark. I'm not too worried about doing this perfectly. So let's try to get the height a little closer. So about there. And I'll just have it come to the end. So close enough. Save it, and there we go. So now when we hit play, we have a suppressor. However, we have a separate problem. You can see the firearm trace does not go to the end here. So it's still using, so if I move this out of the way, it's still using the firearm as, well, the muzzle device. So that's where we need to configure it to use, well, let me rephrase, to correct itself basically. So back to BP underscore suppressor, we need to add a muzzle component. So if we search for muzzle, we have SKG muzzle. So let's go ahead and add that. It's going to throw an assertion. You can just ignore it. At least I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Yeah. It's just telling us that, hey, we're missing, S underscore muzzle socket, that kind of stuff. Just the basics. So you can ignore that. And here we need to go ahead and make our muzzle settings data assets. So let's go to data assets. We have muzzle, and here we have the muzzle init underscore firearm. So that's the one we had before, skeletal mesh being the mesh name. In our case, it's static mesh, and the same socket s underscore muzzle. Well, we're going to have basically the same setup, but static mesh instead of skeletal mesh being the name. So we can go ahead and just duplicate with Control D and rename it to, we'll just call it, it doesn't really matter because we can be generic. So we'll just do underscore muzzle. Open that up and change the muzzle mesh component name to static mesh, the one that matches BP underscore suppressor's mesh, so static mesh. As you can see, it's very much the same as working with everything else. So now we can go ahead and set that as the initialization, so DA underscore muzzle init underscore tutorial underscore muzzle. And that takes care of the initialization settings. Now we have to set the muzzle settings, which is why I threw another error for the assertion. So we already have one of those. Actually, wait, no, we don't. Those are all with the... Okay, yeah, that's all the example content. So we want to go ahead and create a new one of these. So if we right click, go to, oh, that's right, stuff got moved around, data, data asset, search for muzzle, and we have our SKG PDA underscore muzzle settings. Select that, DA underscore muzzle settings underscore muzzle. Crappy name, I'm aware, but there we go. And we can go ahead and give it to BP underscore suppressor. Okay, let me see. Oh, that's right. I never added the socket. So remember, we're using the socket s underscore muzzle defined in our init settings. Let's go ahead and add that so it quits complaining to the mesh. So we'll go to our suppressor, add a new socket, s underscore muzzle, and just put it down towards the end. So we should be good to go. However, there's going to be some additional things. As you can see, we are slightly rotated. We're off 90 degrees. So what we want to do is we want to take this and rotate it 90 degrees to where it points X forwards, just like all the other stuff again. So now when we hit play, there we go. So you can see it has the trace going all the way to the end where the muzzle device is. And that's what we want. So that's good. Now, what do all the settings do? Because there's not really a whole lot. We're going to ignore the muzzle temperature for now, but that's pretty self-explanatory. Basically, this is just kind of a, as you shoot, the temperature can increase, and then you can tie that into your material to make it kind of have a dynamic heating visual, so to speak. But we're mostly focused on these two here. So we have specifically the top one. So we have a muzzle tag, and you can actually see from the comment here, this is kind of the order that it works. So we have a few of them. We have the barrel, muzzle device, and suppressor. So if we take a look at the muzzle for the firearm, it's using muzzle component type dot barrel. Now, the way this works is in order from barrel to muzzle device to suppressor. So in our case, it's a little bit confusing because in our case, the firearm has the barrel and muzzle device already, but pretend it didn't. So if we had a barrel attachment and we added it to the firearm, that barrel would have the type muzzle component type dot barrel. That it would be that tag. Then let's say we added a muzzle device on that barrel. We would give it the tag of muzzle component type dot muzzle device. And what that's going to tell the system to do is it's not going to use the barrel, it's going to use the muzzle device. Then if you ever remove the muzzle device, it's going to go back and use the barrel. Then let's say you add a suppressor onto that muzzle device. So you go from barrel to muzzle device to suppressor. So we're going to use that suppressor tag. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to use the suppressor. It's not going to use the muzzle device, and it's not going to use the barrel. Then if you remove the muzzle device, which has the suppressor on it, it's going to fall back and then use the barrel. So it works in kind of like a chain. It's going to use the outermost piece in that chain, which would be the suppressor in that example. If you remove the suppressor to where you just have a muzzle device, it'll use the muzzle device. If you remove the muzzle device to where you just have a barrel, it'll use the barrel. So that's basically how it goes. So here we can go ahead and rename this one from underscore muzzle to underscore suppressor and set the tag to suppressor. It's not really needed for this specific example, but it's a good thing to do. So if we ever did have a muzzle device, it would just automatically work with that chain. So hopefully that makes sense. And that's really all there is to it for the muzzle devices. So this again handles suppressors, barrels, and muzzle, suppress, yeah, everything in that regard. But yeah, so it's basically a copy and paste from the BP Guns muzzle component, but set up as an attachment. So that's going to be all for this video. And I think we have another attachment. I just can't think of it off the top of my head that we're missing. But yeah, we're going to dive a little bit farther into the muzzle device in a future video very soon and basically kind of cover some additional settings of it. So, how to, for example, dictate whether or not to play a suppressed sound or a not suppressed sound when you shoot, and basic stuff like that. Just kind of some helper stuff that is there. So, with that out of the way, I will see you in the next video.